Hi guys, going to go ahead and look at Module 10, and as usual I'm just going to hit the high points, kind of point out things that may or may not be on the quiz, and hopefully not get bogged down in the details. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, here we are, CompTIA Guide to Network 9th Edition, Module 10, Risk Management. As always, the module objectives: identify people, technology, and malware security risks to a network, increase network security through risk assessment management, use physical security to prevent and detect intrusion, implement device hardening techniques, and explain how security policies guide user activities on the network. These are hopefully by the end of this module, these are the things that you will have a grip on. Vocabulary, you need to know what a hacker is, whether they're white, black, or gray. I'm not a big fan of that word gray hat hackers. White hat hackers are paid employees. They do what they do legally with the company's permission. Black hat hackers are crooks. They do what they do to steal. Gray hat hackers, I'm sorry, but whether their intentions are good or bad, they're still engaging in illegal activity, and generally what that means is that they can be arrested. Courts don't care about your intentions particularly. If you're doing something illegal, they're going to prosecute you. And gray hat hackers can do a lot of damage, even when they intend to educate, or if they're doing bug hunts and things like that. That's okay, except that if you damage it, you're liable for it. That's the difference. A white hat hacker has the permission of the company, and generally also is covered by liability insurance. Gray hat hackers are just digging around. If they accidentally mess something up, it's their fault, and so they can be prosecuted as well. Security risks, you need to know what a vulnerability, what an exploit, and specifically you need to know what zero-day exploits are. Basically, that's when the software first comes out. There's always a lot of bugs, and a zero-day exploit is something that somebody figures out. There are lots of black hat hackers out there that the minute a new software package comes out, they get it, they break it down, and they find whatever bugs are in there and take advantage of them. So that's a zero-day exploit. Social engineering, you need to understand the concept. That is taking advantage of people's good nature or trying to use manipulation, dishonesty in some way to get people to give you what you want, like passwords or data, things like that. Phishing requires knowledge of the target because you're sending them an email pretending to be from some legitimate source saying, hey, click here and do this thing. Baiting, quid pro quo, tailgating, piggybacking, shoulder surfing, all those are attempts to manipulate people to take advantage. So you need to be aware of those. Insider threats, basically anybody that's in the organization that's acting as a hacker. They are generally dangerous because they're already behind the firewall, and that is a bad thing. A lot of times they don't even have to have, it says who may have or develop malicious intent. A lot of times they don't have to have malicious intent. A lot of times incompetency can do a lot more damage than malicious intent. Somebody that just doesn't know what they're doing and they dig around into the network, they get administrative permission, things like that. So important, specifically this right here, principle of least privilege. Basically what that means is you give the employee the minimal amount of access that they need to do their job. You can limit the amount of damage that someone can do by only allowing them into the area that they're involved in, not giving everybody administrative permission. That's always a bad plan. You need to know what a denial of service attack is, and you need to know the different types. Basically, this is the old-fashioned, you got a couple of attackers using PCs to flood a web server. Basically, the principle behind a denial of service attack is you just send so many requests to the web server that it can't handle all the requests and it just shuts down. Now, that's not very common anymore because generally if you only have 2 or 3 people using some kind of a bombing program to send request after request, the router, if it's any good at all, will detect that and it will shut the traffic down. It'll just ignore that traffic, and so the denial of service attack will fail. However, distributed denial of service attack You install backdoors on a lot of PCs. You can have a zombie network that has 30 or 40 or 100,000 computers. All of them start sending attacks to a web server. Basically, the web server is getting hit from so many different IP addresses it can't decide if that's just busy traffic or if it is a denial of service attack. So if it's a really busy day, sometimes the web server will see that as a denial of service attack and shut down. Or if it is a real denial of service attack, the web server can still be fooled into thinking it's business, and it will try to keep up, and then it will shut itself down. So you need to know the different types of denial of service attacks. On-path attacks and deauthorization attacks, you need to know the insecure protocols. FTP 21 is a good example. Nobody uses FTP to transfer files anymore because the original FTP is completely unsecured. Also, WEAP or WEP, if you're setting up a wireless network, you don't ever want to use WEP, although most wireless routers still have as an option. You never want to use that because it takes about 2 seconds to crack. DNS poisoning, backdoors, you need to know this is how you set up a distributed denial of service attack. You install backdoors on a lot of PCs using Trojans or some other kind of sneaky way to do it, and then you coordinate all those to attack together. So you need to know what those different vulnerabilities are. Malicious software, you need to know the difference between viruses, Trojans, worms, bots, and ransomware. Grayson got hit several years ago with ransomware, and that's why they are very paranoid about it, which is why we don't run our sniffing or port sniffing tools or anything like that on the network, because they will shut you down and they will not turn you back on anytime soon. You have to make a very reasonable, rational explanation in length, in meetings at length, before they will turn your access back on. So don't run port sniffing programs on this network unless you're on the private gray cables. Let's see, you need to know the characteristics of malware. They're usually encrypted. They hide. It can be something as a zip file. You send a zip file to somebody with a virus in it. Generally, or at least initially, the virus checkers didn't check zip files. But nowadays they're starting to, because that's how viruses are being sent. You need to understand polymorphism. The program changes itself. And logic bombs basically are time bombs. You need to be aware of those things. Kind of social engineering attack most likely requires a person to have existing knowledge. That would be phishing, because it's an email pretending to be from a legitimate source, so they need to know something about you so they can send from a legitimate source. Risk assessment, that's what this chapter is about. You need to understand what risk assessment, security, and business risk assessment is. You need to know the difference. Vulnerability assessments, you need to know about penetration testing, know what a red team, blue team exercise is. Basically what that means is the red team attacks, the blue team defends, and during that interplay, during that exchange, we figure out where the network is the weakest. Scanning tools, you're already familiar with a couple of them. Port sniffers like Nmap are scanning tools. Packet trackers like Wireshark. Once again, you do not want to run those on a commercial or a production network. Where I talked about Nmap. Metasploit is interesting because not only does it scan, it's not only a good port scanner, but it also suggests attacks. So once you've scanned some ports with Metasploit, then it says, "Oh, hey, you could use a SQL injection here, or you could use a brute force password here." It knows the things to look for to suggest which attack would be the best way to go. A honeypot is a server that's outside of a firewall. Basically, it's a trap. It's a decoy. It's designed to fool hackers, and as they try to hack into it, then it gains information about them. Occasionally, they'll load one up with a virus of some kind, so if someone hacks into it, then they get infected with the virus or the malware. A honeypot is a dangerous thing. Basically, what you have is you have your network behind the firewall, then you have the firewall, and then you have a honeypot connected to the internet directly. Generally, it's a Windows server because their security is kind of iffy anyway. but you can't make it too wide open. You just have to leave noticeable back doors into it. You don't want to make it too easy, otherwise people know, hey, this is a honeypot and we don't want to hack into it. But if you're careful and you set it up where it looks like you might be trying to protect it and just don't know what you're doing, people will hack into it, and you can gather a lot of information about what they do and their techniques by just looking at the forensic analysis. Physical security, the most important thing you can do to protect your company or your network. Lock the door to the server room. It's a whole lot easier to hack a computer when you're sitting in front of it with a keyboard and a mouse rather than trying to go over the network. So lock the door to the server room. Different types of control access, or access control rather. You have keypads, you have to type in a number. You have cards or access badges. Biometrics, you have to use a thumbprint or eyeball pattern or whatever. An access control vestibule is a little room basically with a guard in it that has two locked doors. People come in one, the guard checks them out before he lets them out of the other one. Racks that have locks and cabinets that have locks, anything that you can lock up is a good thing to do to protect your network investment. It's what a server room might look like. So you've got badge readers at every door, and you have to have one to get in, but then you also have to have one to get into the data room. This way, regular people come in here in the IT offices, but only specific people can go into the data room itself. Detection methods for physical intrusion. This is all about security cameras and motion detectors and things like that. Device hardening, these are things that you can do software related or even network settings related to protect your network and make it harder to hack into. Make sure you keep your updates up to date, and your especially firmware and operating systems. However, you want to be careful. You have to, if you've got a company, if you've got more than one computer or more than one or two computers, then you have to be careful to analyze updates before you install them. You don't want to just install them when they come out. Number one, because there's a good chance it'll break something. That happens a lot. Number two, because even if it doesn't break things in other networks, it might break something of yours that is perhaps you have in-house built software. So you have a computer that's not in production, that's just on its own in the network, and you install the latest updates there, and you run it for a while and make sure it's working. And then if everything works out, you go ahead and let that update run in the network itself. So you want to be careful about controlling updates. But you do need to keep up to date, because that's the first line of defense against zero-day exploits and things like that. Administrative credentials, you do not give anyone administrative credentials unless they absolutely have to have it. Remember, we said a while ago, the principle of least access is the way to protect your network. You keep everybody down in the user level, and you limit the amount of damage they can do. Some require advanced privileges, and that's okay, but number one, you need to vet them very carefully, and number two, you need to have checks and balances to keep an eye on them. That's very important. So these are some guidelines that you can follow to protect your network. These are some things that you can do as far as network settings go that will make your network as safe as possible. There's no way you can completely protect a network, but you can make it safer. Hashing, you need to understand how that process works. Basically, you're permanently encrypting a password. Once you hash a password, you can never undecrypt it. You can never unhash it. So the computer hashes the password before it puts it in the database. So now nobody can know what the real password is. However, the computer has a key that allows the hash to be translated, and that is what the computer uses to decide whether that person's password is legitimate. You need to know how that works. Anti-malware software, you need to keep yours up to date. Its purpose is to detect things before they become a problem. It stops it at the email gate. It stops it at the file transfer gate. things like that. You want to make sure that malware gets checked for anytime there's incoming data. You need to know the different kinds and why you would use different ones. Asset disposal, this is for like hard drives. If you've got a company and you upgrade to new hard drives, those old hard drives, even though you magnetize them and try to erase them, it's still possible to gather some data if you've got a decent forensics person. So what you want to do is give them to a company who will run them through a chipper or shredder and chip them all up into little tiny pieces. And also that company will have liability insurance, so if somehow your data really does get out, it's their insurance that has to pay for the damages. Security policies, these are rules that the company makes to govern what gets done on the network. The goals, you need to know what they're trying to accomplish by having a security policy. Bring your own device, that's letting people use their own laptops or their own phones or whatever on the network, on the company network. It's generally a bad idea. You can use mobile device management software, but what you're doing is asking people to allow the company to control their software, their devices, and sometimes that gets a little cloudy. So you're better off if you're doing policy for your company just to say, you know what, we'll buy you a device. You don't need to bring your own. Acceptable use policies are the rules that you sign off when you hire onto a company. Basically what it says is this network belongs to the company, it's for work and not for anything else. So if they catch you browsing YouTube or checking out your Instagram or sitting on Facebook all day or whatever, that's a termination offense right there. So acceptable use policy defines what's allowed and what's not on the network. If you're playing video games or things like that, or if you're not locking your computer up or whatever you're doing or not doing, that gives the company recourse as to how to deal with you. Non-disclosure agreements, this is agreeing not to tell anybody what you worked on or what you said or what you did for the company for an extended amount of time. Usually it's 3 or 5 years. And then let's say you worked on something for a proprietary software for some company, and that software is worth a lot of money, and you happen to know the secrets of how it works, you would ordinarily sign a non-disclosure agreement if you wanted to work for that company. And what it says is basically you agree not to tell anybody, or else you'll go to jail and pay a lot of money. And so that's kind of how that works. Password policies, you should be familiar with these already. But anyway, you're going to need to know these on the quiz. Privileged user, this is a acceptable use agreement for upper level users. So everybody signs the initial document, and then the administrators, like if you're a SQL administrator, database admin, network admin, then you would have to sign a privileged user agreement that has more detailed rules about what you can and can't do. Anti-malware policy, you should be familiar with all these different, these are basically the purposes or the guides or the hoped outcomes for anti-malware policy. This is what you want to try to accomplish by having anti-malware software in your network. What kind of software can be used to secure employee-owned devices, BYOD? Well, we talked about a while ago, mobile device management software. Like I said, that gets a little hinky because you're asking people to let you control their personal devices. All right, summary. Now that the lesson's ended, you should, once again, this is what we hope to accomplish: identify people, technology, and malware security risks, increase network security through risk management and assessment, use physical security, lock your doors, implement device hardening techniques, and explain how security policies guide user behavior on the network. Okay, so once again, that is Module 10, and that's pretty much the high points. If you have any questions, the Canvas inbox is the way to get in touch with me, and hopefully that will be helpful. Go ahead and get the chapter quiz done. Make sure you read the chapter. Guys, if you're not reading the chapter, you're hurting yourself. And I will see you in class. Have a good day.